Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to take a look at logic and how Excel can use that to help us in our formulas and in our functions. So the first thing we need to understand about logic is the values of true and false. And if I do a very simple equation right here in this cell, I'm just going to type in equals 1 equals 1. Okay, we're going to test whether or not that's a true or false statement. And when I hit enter, it says that it's true. It is evaluated to true. Now, likewise, if I say, well, is 1 less than 1, and I hit enter, it says that that statement is false, and that's what we would agree with. But if I say, is 2 greater than 1, okay, we would get the value of true. So that's how that logic is being compared. So what we would then might want to do at some point is be able to string together more logic tests. But we'll get to that in just a second. So the first thing you can see on our gradebook here, it might look a little familiar from one of the previous lessons, but we're looking at, does this student have grade concerns or absence concerns, and do they have grade and absence concerns? And go ahead and delete that little test we did there. So let's say a grade concern is anyone who's below a C, so below a 70%. That's when we start to get a little bit concerned. And let's say if you have more than 2 absences, we're going to be concerned about you. So I can test right here if Brooke has a grade concern. I can say, well, is her grade less than 0.7, which is our 70% cutoff for a C? And you can see that she doesn't have any grade concerns. And if we autofill that down, we can see now that these students, this is their grade concerns. But what I can't do is do another operation right next to it for logic. Now I could write a grade concern separately. I could say, I could maybe delete all of these and say, does Brooke have a an absence concern? Is her absences greater than 2? And she does not have an absence concern, and I can autofill that down and we'll get all the answers that are appropriate. So like Riley, Caitlin, and Joseph all have absence concerns. But how do I do those two things together? Because those are very basic formulas that we just wrote. Well, let's delete this and let's start with something else. So now I'm going to say equals to start my formula, and then I'm going to ask OR is the name of the function we're going to use. And in OR, it will take these logical tests, and we can have as many of them as we like. And what we're going to say here is, does Brooke have a grade concern? Is her grade less than 0.7, comma, or does she have an absence concern? Are her absences greater than 2? And then I'm going to close the parenthesis there on the OR. So now we're getting to do 2 different logical tests. If either of them is true, then the entire function will evaluate to true. Let's take a look at what happens when I hit enter. Okay, she does not have a grade concern or an absence concern. Let's autofill that down to Caitlin for a second. Now, Caitlin doesn't have a grade concern, but she does have a absence concern. So that would be true. And if I autofill this down all the way, then you will see that I've got the appropriate responses for each of these students. Okay, so if one of these things is correct or it meets the criteria, it will evaluate to true. Next, we're going to go over here and do grade and absence concern. Now, most people are able to guess what the name of this function is going to be, but it is and. And as it states, we're going to test to see, are both of these true? Now, if both of these are true, the and function will also result in true. But if even one of them is false, because we can have as many logical tests here as we would like, if even one of them is false, then the entire thing will result in false. Okay, so let's take a look. Do you have a grade concern? Are you less than 0.7, comma? Do you have an absence concern? Are you greater than 2? Close my parenthesis there. And as you can see, we do have 2 students that have both grade and absence concerns, and so that might be something we want to take a look at. Okay, now Most of the time, we don't want to just leave that true or false in there. That's not a very friendly message. We probably want to say yes or no. So if you've used the if function before, I'm going to go over here and just type in equals if. And the first thing it asks for is a logical test. Now, we could do a logical test in there and say, is the grade less than 0.7? And then it says, hey, if this test turns out to be true, what would you like to say? And I'd say yes. And if this test turns out to be false, what would you like to say? And I'll say no. And so here we say, well, Caitlin does not have a grade concern, so we put in no. What we're going to do is use this same if function, but we're going to graft in that and or statements. So let's take a look how that works. So here I am. I've got my function already written for the or, and I'm going to insert the if function right before it. I'm going to say if, and then if I type that parenthesis, it says, what do you want your logical test to be? Well, we've already written that logical test, and so I'm going to go after that and hit a comma. So it says, what do you want the value to be if true? Well, I would like it to be yes. There is a grade or absence concern. Likewise, what do I want it to be if it's false? I'm going to say no, and I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see that that worked there. And if I autofill that down, there you go, nice friendly no or yes. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing to my and column. This is a very common thing you see in Excel, where we're going to do these tests, and then based on whether or not they evaluate to true or false, we want to provide some other more friendly answer. It's not always going to be yes or no, but something that is a little more pleasing to the eye than true or false. All right, so that is and or. There's one more function that really isn't appropriate on this spreadsheet, but I just want to show you what it does, and sometimes it comes in handy. I'm going to come over here and do that same old, does 1 equal 1, and it evaluates to true. I can put that entire test inside of the not function, and what it's going to do is just flip a true to false and a false to true. Can't really think of a great example of why you would need that right now, but you might come across times where you write an entire test that's very long, and then if it comes out to true, that's actually bad news, and false is actually good news, and so you can just use that not to flip a false to true or true to false. All right, I'm going to delete that cell's contents right there. All right, now you might remember this letter grade column from the last time we spoke, and what we've got here is an opportunity to introduce yet another function that is new, and that is the ifs function. Now what we used last time is VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, but we're going to look at a little simpler version of what we might be able to do. And so ifs is basically a way that we can write a function, and the way we used to do this is put if statements or functions inside of if functions inside of if functions, because we have multiple tests that we would like to do. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to write one function that will take care of all of our different grade values. And so my first logical test is I'm going to say, hey, is this grade greater than or equal to 0.9? And if it is, my value of true is I would like to have it be A. And then is C2 greater than or equal to 0.8? And if it is, let's have that be a B. Is C2 greater than or equal to 0.7? Well, then let's have it be a C. Is C2 greater than or equal to 0.6? Let's have it be a B, or excuse me, a D. And then is C2 less than 0.6? Because anything less than 0.6 is going to be that F. All right, so let's go ahead. We've got multiple conditions that we're testing, multiple statements, and then multiple values to return if that becomes true. So we start on the left, and the first thing that becomes true is what we execute on, and then we exit that function. So let's take a look. So there's an A. If I autofill that down all the way, we get our A's, our C's, our A's, B's, and then down here is the F. So you'll notice that if I want to cross, it's evaluating these in order, and once it finds one that it matches, it places that next value in. That's a look at the ifs function.